Failure, whether it's personal, professional, or spiritual, is something we all experience, and at times it can feel like a heavy burden. But why do we fail, and what is the deeper lesson behind it? According to the Buddhist teachings, failure isn't just an unfortunate outcome. It's a part of the natural cycle of life, and how we respond to it can reveal profound truths about ourselves and the world around us. In fact, the Buddha saw failure as an integral aspect of the human condition, one that, when understood properly, can lead to greater wisdom, compassion, and ultimately, freedom. The Buddha's core teaching, that of dukkha, often translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness, shows us that failure isn't just a rare event in life, but a constant thread woven through our experience. Life is inherently uncertain, ever-changing, and impermanent. When we fail, it's often because we've tried to resist or deny these fundamental truths. We become attached to outcomes, to expectations, or to the idea of how things should be. We imagine that if we just work hard enough, plan enough, or control enough, we can avoid discomfort or failure altogether. But the truth is, the more tightly we hold on to these illusions, the more likely we are to suffer. The Buddha taught that the root causes of our suffering, and by extension, our failures, lie in three mental poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Ignorance refers to a lack of understanding of the impermanent nature of all things. We fail when we don't see that everything, including our successes and failures, is temporary. Our emotions, our relationships, our achievements, they come and go. Failure feels unbearable because we mistakenly think that success or happiness is something that should last forever. But this attachment to permanence creates resistance, anxiety, and ultimately, disappointment. The Buddha urged us to cultivate mindfulness and awareness, to recognize that all things are in a constant state of change, including our failures. Understanding this can help us face failure with greater ease rather than fear. Attachment is another key reason why we fail, according to the Buddha. When we become attached to specific outcomes or identities, whether it's the idea of being a successful entrepreneur, a perfect parent, or a respected authority figure, we set ourselves up for suffering. Why? Because attachment to these ideas limits our ability to flow with life as it is. When things don't go as we hoped, or when we fall short of our expectations, we feel disillusioned and defeated. The Buddha's practice of non-attachment isn't about detachment or indifference. It's about freeing ourselves from rigid ideas of how things should be and allowing ourselves to accept what is. Through this, we can find peace even in the face of failure. Understanding that failure does not define us or our worth. Aversion is the third poison that leads to failure, and it's especially relevant when we face moments of setback. Aversion is our instinct to reject pain, discomfort, or anything that we perceive as negative. We may fail because we avoid failure itself, running from the uncomfortable feelings it triggers. This resistance often causes us to act impulsively, to give up too soon, or to engage in self-criticism, which only reinforces a cycle of failure. The Buddha's teachings encourage us to approach life, including failure, with equanimity, the ability to remain balanced and composed, regardless of what happens. By embracing failure as a natural part of the process, rather than something to be feared or avoided, we can move forward with a greater sense of resilience and wisdom. So what is the path to overcoming failure according to the Buddha? It's a journey of understanding, acceptance, and transformation. By practicing mindfulness, we learn to become more aware of our thoughts, emotions, and reactions. We begin to notice when we're attaching to specific outcomes or resisting difficult feelings. Through meditation and self-inquiry, we can recognize that failure isn't a permanent state. It's simply a moment in time, a lesson to be learned, and an opportunity for growth. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths offer us a clear guide. We can acknowledge the reality of suffering, understand its causes, see that it can be transcended, and ultimately walk the Eightfold Path to freedom. The Buddha also encouraged us to cultivate compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves. When we fail, we often become our harshest critics, berating ourselves for not being good enough. But Buddha's teachings remind us that we are all part of a greater whole, and that our imperfections and failures are what make us human. Rather than seeing failure as a sign of personal inadequacy, we can choose to view it as a stepping stone on the path to greater wisdom, understanding, and compassion. When we can see failure through this lens, it becomes a teacher in itself, showing us where we need to grow, where we can improve, and how we can become more mindful and present in our lives.